Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 203 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite a few birds, we got a few extinct animals too, so I know a lot of the people that enjoy those kind of things will be very, very happy, with Great Cakes mod of course dominating it, but we've got some other people made some mods. So it's always cool to feature someone else other than just Great Cakes. But, you know, Great Cakes make so awesome mods, I can't not show them off because they are pretty brilliant. But yeah, we're going to be starting off with the Great Cakes mod that is done for the European bee eater, not bird eater. So let's have a look at these little guys. I know you guys are going to be annoying. Is that an adult? No. Let's see if we can spot an adult there. It's kind of one hanging out there. Let's have a look at this one over here. They're going to be hopefully use the perch. I want to see them use the perch. Oh, that one is, I think. We're on line to use the perch. Anyway, we'll start off. So the European bee eater, or Meropus encephaster, is a near passerine bird in the bee eater family Moporidae. And they breed in southern Central Europe, northern and southern Africa, and western Asia. And except for the resident population in South Africa, or southern Africa, the species is strongly migratory, wintering in tropical Africa. So this species occurs in a spring offshoot north of its usual range, with occasional breeding actually appearing in northern Europe. So if you're lucky, you might be able to spot one breeding, which is always cool to see. So in terms of its taxonomy and things like that, the European bee-eater was originally described by Carl Linnaeus in 1758 in the 10th edition of Systema Naturae. And its name is pretty much bee-eater twice, since Meropus is bee-eater in ancient Greek, and Pasteur is Latin, which means bee-eater. So it's basically bee-eater. That's its scientific name, which is quite funny. But in terms of its anatomy and description, these guys, like other bee-eater species, are richly coloured and quite slender birds. They are brown. It has brown and yellow upper parts, whilst the wings are green and the beak is black, as you can see there. They can reach a length of about 27 to 29 centimetres, including 2 elongated central tail feathers, and weigh about 44 to 78 grams. Or about 52 grams on average. Sexes are alike, with females tending to have greener rather than gold feathers on their shoulders. And non-breeding plumage is typically much duller, with a blue-green back and no elongated central tail feathers. More similar to these ones kind of over here. Juveniles resemble a non-breeding adult, but with less variation in their feather colours. And adults will begin their molt in June or July and complete the process in August and September. And there is a further molt into breeding plumage in winter in Africa. So there is quite a bit of molting going on, of course. Let's see if we can zoom back in again. Really, really wonderful little guy. Anyway, in terms of breeding, so these guys are gregarious. So they nest colonially. So they nest all in one big group. Typically on sandy banks, preferably near rivers or river shores. And usually this begins around the middle of May. They make a relatively long tunnel in which they lay 5 to 8 spherical white eggs in around the beginning of June. And both males and females will care for the eggs, and they brood them for about 3 weeks, and then they'll also feed and roost communally, so together. During courtship, though, the male will feed large items of food to the female, while the male eats the small ones himself. And most males are monogamous, so, monogamous means they only form a pair, but there is occasional bigamy being encountered. And they have a typical call that is distinctive, like mellow, liquid, and blurry sound, which is quite interesting. I'm not going to replicate that for you, because I have never heard a bee-eater before, but I'm sure you can find the right sites to look into that. I want to see them actually use the perch. I don't know when they're going to do that. I might have to move it. Let's see if they'll use the perch. There's a really, really cool one there. Flying around. So yeah, part of the mod is that, all of the birds have now got flying animations, which is really, really cool, as they're running animations. There's one flying over here. Is this a juvenile? We'll have a look at the juvenile from now on. I think it's going to use the perch, which will be cool, hopefully. I don't think it will. Oh, will it or won't they? Oh, they're all going to eat their food. So look an adult. It's a juvenile. No, we won't have a look at the adult. Anyway, so in terms of feeding, this bird typically breeds in open country in warmer climates, and as the name suggests, bee eaters predominantly eat insects, especially bees, wasps, and hornets. They catch these insects in flight, in sorties, or on an open perch. And before eating the bee, they will actually remove its stinger by repeatedly hitting the insect on a kind of hard surface. And they can eat up to 250 bees a day, so they have quite voracious birds. The most important prey for this species is hymenopterans, mostly European honeybees. And a study found that this can comprise between 69.4 to 82% of their diet, so it's going to use the perch, which is awesome. So their diet is predominantly honeybees. The impact on bee populations, however, is small, as they'll eat less than 1% of the workers. So they're quite, even though there are a lot of bees for them to eat, so they don't worry about bees going extinct. A study actually found that European bee eaters convert food to body weight more efficiently if it's fed a mixture of bees and dragonflies than it either eats one or the other, which is interesting as well. In terms of predation of honeybees, if an apiary kind of is set up close to a bee eater colony, a large number of honeybees are eaten because they are more abundant. However, studies show that bee eaters do not intentionally fly into an apiary. Rather, they feed on insects caught on pastures or meadows within a radius of 12 kilometers from the colony. This maximum distance being reached only when there's a lack of food. Observations also show that birds actually enter the apiaries only on cold and rainy periods, where the bees do not leave the hive or other insects, or another insect's prey is harder to find. So when they're more desperate, they will go to, colonies. Many bee eaters, though, believe that bee eaters are a main obstacle, causing worker bees not to forage, but instead stay in their hives for much of the day between May and the end of August. However, a study carried out in eucalyptus forests in the Alos region, 80 kilometers east of Tripoli, Libya, showed that bee eaters were actually not the main obstacle of bee foraging, and it's the opposite. The foraging rates were actually higher in the presence of birds than in their absence in some cases, with the average bird meal consisting about 90% honeybees and 9.2% beetles. Predation is most likely when the bees are queening or during peak migrations in late March to mid-April and mid-September. Hives close to or under trees or overhead cables are also at increased risk as the birds pounce on flying insects from their perches, just like they're perching up there. So yeah, the really cool aspect of these guys as well. So yeah, that's the Bee Eater, done by Grey Cakes Mod. Another winner. So next up, we're moving on from the Bee Eater. We're going to have a look at a duck. We've got the Wandering Whistling Duck. So that's quite a big name, the Wandering Whistling Duck. Let's have a look at these guys over yonder. So the Wandering Whistling Duck is Dendrus cygna acuata. These guys are species of whistling duck that inhabit tropical and subtropical areas in Australia, Philippines, Borneo, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Pacific Islands. They have 3 different subspecies, with the dominant subspecies being the Indonesian wandering duck, Australis being the Australian wandering whistling duck, and Permagetta being the New Britain wandering whistling duck. So, a lot of words there. In terms of their description, we'll have a look at one that is not sleeping. Males and females, that's not what we wanted. Males and females tend to be quite similar. So formerly named tree ducks, the wandering whistling duck has its new name because of its loud whistling calls and their whistling noise their wings make during flight. They have a long neck and legs that make them almost look like a cross between a goose and a duck. They have strong head and neck with a darker crown and a hind neck. The breasts contain, you can see, black spotting, and the feathers are mostly dark brown, and you can see a little bit of dark brownish at the bottom there. They range in size between 54 to 60 centimeters in height and weigh on average 750 grams. So they mainly feed on grasses, water lilies, water plants, and occasionally insects and aquatic vertebrates. So very occasionally they'll feed on like fish and things like that. In terms of its habitat, the wandering whistling duck tends to live in deep lagoons, flooded grasslands, or dams. They enjoy the water and rarely leave the shore, and they can swim and dive with ease. In terms of breeding, these guys breed during the tropical wet season, usually between December and May. And during this time, 6 to 15 eggs are laid in nests not far from water, and usually in a high grass or sheltered area, which is interesting as well. So they are very, very attentive parrots, and they're also considered least concerned, so they're quite a common species, which is good to know. And we've got to have a look at these cute little babies, because the babies got that typical little duck pattern to them, how the baby ducks look, but it looks like, it's really, really long and awkward. Very, very cute. So, the great one there. So that's one done by Great Cakes Mod. In terms of like the other Aboriginal languages, there's lots of different names for them in different Aboriginal languages, but I'm not going to try and pronounce them because I will butcher them. But yeah, that's still a really, really cool mod. Love to see another Great Cakes mod, a winner. So, moving on from the Wandering Whistling Duck, we have got the Great Buzzard done by Monsoon. So we always love a Monsoon mod, so let's have a look at these guys. So really, really beautiful. So the Great Buzzard is a bird in the buzzard family and the only living member of the genus Otis, or Otis. They breed in open grasslands and farmlands in northern Morocco, south and central Europe, and temperate to Central East Asia, with European populations being mainly resident, but Asian populations migrate farther south in winter. They are considered endangered though. But Portugal and Spain now holds about 60% of their population. It was extirpated from Great Britain in the 19th century, but there are efforts to help, and as we'll kind of get into. So in terms of taxonomy, the genus name Otis was introduced in 1758 by Carl Linnaeus. We know and love him. Comes from the Greek name Otis, which kind of mentions the bird as well. And it's kind of like a bird means slow and deliberate, or tarda means deliberate or slow. So basically, its name means slow bird, pretty much. And buzzard comes from the Old French mustarda. So the adult male great buzzard is among the heaviest living flying animals. The male will typically be between 90 and 105 centimeters, or between 2 foot 11 and 3 foot 5 inches tall, with a length of about 115 centimeters or 3 foot 9. And have a 2.1 to 2.7 meter, or a 6 foot 11 to 8 foot 10 foot wide wingspan. So quite big. The male can reach between 5.8 to 18 kilograms, with the heaviest verified specimen being about 21 kilograms or 46 pounds, which is a world record. In a study in Spain, one male actually was recorded 19 kilograms. The larger specimens have always been reported, but they remain unverified. Adult males also in different areas tend to be variable. In Russia, males tend to weigh on average between about 9 to 2 kilograms, but in Spain they can weigh 11 kilograms during breeding season. So it depends on where you are, depending. But average weights almost show an exact match for that of male Kori bustards. And among the flying animals and land birds, male Indian cordons may match or exceed these mean body measurements, but not their maximum weight. So they have bigger wingspans, but not as heavy. So it's kind of a close tie for, or one of the biggest contenders for the largest flying bird alive today, though there's a lot of stiff competition. But yeah, that's really, really cool. They're also arguably the most sexually dimorphic extant bird, so in terms of size. So in terms of males and females, adult males weigh an average 2.48 times than the female. So that's quite interesting as well. So we'll have a look at the female. So she's a little bit more drab and a little bit smaller. So going on mass, the only bird with higher dimorphism is the green peafowl. The males are only 4 times as heavy as the females. So the female is about a third smaller in linear dimensions, so she will get between 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2 foot 6 to 2 foot 9, about 90 centimeters in length, or about 2 foot 11, and have a wingspan of 5 foot 11, or 180 centimeters. Overall, though, the female's weight will be a mean of about 3.82 kilograms, though in some areas they can get about up to 6 kilograms as well, so they can get quite big, but nowhere near as big as those males, of course. So in terms of their colours, you can see the adult male. We'll have a look back at the adult male, because why not? Adult males are brown above, barred with blackish colouring, and white below, with a long grey neck and head. His breast and lower neck sides are chestnut in colour, as you can kind of see there. Chestnut, and there is a golden wash to the back to in the brightest colours that tend to increase as the male ages. In the breeding season, the male also has these long kind of white bristles coming out of its neck that measure about 2 to 15 centimetres, or about 4.7 to 5.9 inches in length, and continuously grow from the 3rd to the 6th year of life. In flight, though, its long wings will predominantly be white with brown showing along the edges as well, and the breast are buff with brown and pale coloration as well, and it helps to be camouflaged as well, with immature birds typically just resembling the females, being a little bit more basic. There are other species that do overlap with these species as well, and in terms of its kind of anatomy, it's got a long neck, long legs, heavy barrel chest, which is fairly typical for its overall shape and habitat for its family, and its habitat and things like that. But other species do live with it, such as the McQueen's, Hobara, and Little Bustards, but they're nowhere near as large, so that's the easiest way to tell them apart. So in terms of their distribution and habitat, we'll have a look at the female. No, that's not what we want to do. We'll have a look at the female again. So the females, the distributed habitat. So the birds tend to live in grassland or steppe habitats, defined by open, somewhat rolling landscapes. And they also can be found in undisturbed civilization, and seem to prefer areas with wild or cultivated crops such as cereals, vineyards, and fodder plants. However, during the breeding season, they will actively avoid areas with humans, as they can be disturbed by agricultural practices. The breeding range from the great buzzard stretches from Portugal to Matura, though previously the species even bred in Russian Gromysky Kari. And as a result, the populations increase around much of its range. More than half the population is now found in central Spain, with about 30,000 individuals. In Iran, though, the species only survives in a small area, as with the census of January 25 and just 19 individuals remaining. So they are, as I mentioned, endangered. So we'll get into that a little bit more conservation soon. In terms of their behaviour and ecology, they are gregarious, especially in winter when gatherings of several birds may occur. Males and female groups do not mix outside of the breeding season, and the great buzzards have a stately slow walk, but tends to run when disturbed rather than flying. Running speeds have not been measured, but adult females have been known to outrun red foxes, reaching a trotting speed of 48 kilometers an hour, so they can run quite fast. In both sexes, they're usually silent, but can engage in deep grunts when alarmed or angered. And the displaying adult male may produce some booming, grunting, or raucous noises, and the female may produce some guttural calls at the nest, and brooding young males may make a soft call when communicating to their mothers. We'll have a look at the male again. So in terms of their migration, some individuals on the Iberian Peninsula will make some short migrations between 5 to 200 kilometers, moving more to higher summer temperatures. European populations are typically sedentary or don't move too far. Populations around Russia will actually migrate 1,000 kilometers to spend the winter season in Crimea as well. And populations in northern Mongolia will migrate over 2,000 kilometers to the Shaanxi province in China. So they often will gather in large numbers at pre-migratory sites and order to move collectively to the wintering grounds. And in the Iberian Peninsula, they've been seen to choose different periods of movements based on sex, which is kind of interesting as well. So in terms of reproduction, and we'll get a chance to talk about the cute little babies, because we always love talking about the cute little babies. So the great buzzard breeds in March, with a single male may mate with up to 5 females, and before mating, the males will molt into their breeding plumage about January, with males establishing dominance with their groups during winter, clashing violently by ramming into each other and hitting each other with their bills. And like other bustards, they actually will display in a lek, so they typically will display in an area with all of them, and then the females come and pick them, and that's what's called lek. In the species, though, the male has a flamboyant display, beginning with the strutting male puffing out his throat to the size of a football. He then tilts forward and pulls his head so that his long whiskey chin feathers point upwards, and the head's no longer visible. He next cocks his tail flat against his back, exposing the normally hidden bright white plumage, then he lowers his wings, and then the primary feathers fold out, with the wings secondarily fanning out. The displaying males, who may walk around for several minutes at a time with feathers flared and head buried, waiting for hens to arrive, may also be described as a foam bath because of their appearance. So, of course, once they made the babies, one or three olive or tan-coloured glossy eggs will be laid, and the nests are typically in shallow scrapes made by the female, in dry, soft slopes and plains, and usually situated in a prior-like location. Nests are situated in sparse clusters, where the study of Mongolia suggested there was a minimum of 9 meters between each other. On the same study, nests were planted mid-elevation on a hill as well, and nesting sites typically are full of dense grass vegetation, about 15 to 35 centimeters high, likely for protection against predators and excessive exposure to sunlight. Eggs will weigh about 150 grams, or about 5.3 ounces, on an average about 75 millimeters to 56 millimeters tall and wide, or about 3 inches tall to 2 inches wide. The female will then incubate these eggs for about 21 to 28 days, and the chicks almost immediately leave the nest after they hatch, although they don't move very much far from their mother until they're about a year old, with young great buzzards begin developing their adult plumage at about 2 months of age and begin to develop flying skills at the same time. They practice by stretching, running, flapping, and making small hops and jumps to get airborne, but by 3 months old, they're able to fly reasonable distances. And if threatened, the young will stand still, using their downy plumage as kind of camouflage, and they typically will become independent by their first winter, but normally stay with their mother until the next breeding season. Males usually start to mate about 5 to 6 years of age, although they may actually start gauging and breeding behavior at a younger age, and they typically breed, females will first breed when they're about 2 or 3 years old. So that kind of shows, the competition there. We'll have a look at the male before we finish up. So in terms of their diet, they are omnivorous, taking different foods from different seasons. So they'll feed on mostly plant material and also invertebrates as well. So they'll eat a lot of legumes, grapes, common dandelion, wheats, and barley. But prey insects, they'll often eat bees and butterflies and millipedes and things like that. So that's what they typically eat. But mostly they are more herbivores. Small vertebrates have been known to gene taken when they arrive. They'll often sometimes also eat toxic blister beetles to self-medicate, which is interesting as well. So they have some very interesting, adaptations there. In terms of winter or foraging, in the winter the feeding intensity increases as they then decreases into the morning of both sexes as well. And the sexual difference is greater when legume availability is smaller in central Spain. So the males will forage slightly less intensely than females, could compete longer periods and for a bigger bite size, which allows them to eat more food more easily, which is interesting as well. In terms of their mortality, they typically live for about 10 years, but some have been known to live about 15 years or more, with the maximum known lifespan being about 28 years. Adult males seem to have a higher mortality rate than females because of fierce interspecies combat, so it's fighting with other great buzzards males. And many males may perish in the first couple of years of maturity because of this reason. But young tend to be very good prey for a lot of interesting species. So predators of eggs and hatchlings can be raptors, corvids, hedgehogs, weasels, badgers, wild boar, rats, and things like that. And more serious predators can be hooded crows and red foxes. Once they get a bit older, they can be predated on by foxes, lynx, grey wolves, dogs, jackals, and things like that. Adult male great buzzards can be preyed upon by white-tailed eagles, but also golden eagles, eagle owls as well. But for the most part, they are big enough to deal with most predators. But in terms, as I mentioned, they are considered endangered, which is a bit of a worry. So the global population is estimated to be between 44,000 and 51,000 birds, with about 38,000 to 47,000 living in Europe, and 30,000 or more half in Spain. So Hungary is the next largest population with about 2,000. So they are decreased across much of their range, which is a bit of a worry. And they have declined in places like Kazakhstan and Mongolia. So size of populations do exist in Spain. Russia is about 8,000 birds. Turkey's got between 800 to 3,000 birds. Portugal's got about 1,435 birds. And Mongolia's got about 1,000 birds. So there is a bit of a worry there. And some areas they have decreased. The Eastern European steppe zone has kind of decreased since from about 10 to 12,000 during the Second World War. So I mentioned they are quite endangered, so they are classified as endangered with a lot of the threats they face. They face threats such as the ploughing of grasslands, quite intensive agriculture, afforestation, increasing development of irrigation schemes, the construction of roads, power lines, fencing and ditches, mechanisms, chemical fertilizers and pesticides, fire and predation by dogs, and serious threats for juvenile chicks. And hunting for adults can be quite a issue for them. So there's a lot of issues facing the great buzzard. But despite their large size, they're able to fly at high speeds, and actually often mutilated or killed by overhead electricity cables. That's a big issue as well. So they're trying to work on ways to reduce mortality with those cables. I've often buried part of the dangerous cables as well, or made them fluorescent to warn the birds. And this measure has actually worked quite well and rapidly reduced mortality. So just putting some lights on or burying what you can has really helped them, which is interesting as well. But they were also normally native to Great Britain, but they seem to have been, hunted to extinction, or which is interesting as well. In terms of 2004, they have been working on reintroductions in a place called Wiltshire in the UK, taking some from Russia into the UK to try and establish a self-sustaining population in the UK. And even though once native to Britain, they are considered alien species under English law. The reintroduction carried out in parallel with the University of Bath. And by 2020, this population is actually considered doing quite well, with a population of 100 birds. But yeah, there is luckily some conservation efforts to try and help them. A lot of those issues, can be fixed, with a lot of other little things. Like the power lines one, that's a great example. Cultivation's another big issue. But overall, they're doing okay compared to a lot of other species, which is good. But they are still could have endangered and could decline quite a bit. So hopefully there is a little bit more work to try and help them out, which is always awesome. But yeah, that's a great monsoon mod. Always a winner, chicken dinner. So next up, we're going to have a look at another Great Cakes mod. You love to see it. We've got here the Pantanal Jaguar, and there's really not much to say about the Pantanal Jaguar, except it's a jaguar from the Pantanal. But yeah, the population down there, the Pantanal, is actually considered to have the most densest population of jaguars, with about 6,000 to 7,000 living down there. So quite a stronghold for them. And a lot of studies working on them have identified about 137 living down there and trying to work on identifying individuals to help them. And you've broken your leg, but that's fine. I'm sorry, I've had coughs today. We'll have a look at the other one there. Yeah, you can see this is basically just an excuse for Great Cakes to make their own mod of a jaguar. And as to say, it looks pretty good. I would say I'm definitely a big fan. I love a Great Cakes mod. I would say it's a winner. Looks really, really good. So next up, we'll have a look at the babies, because the babies look quite cute. Because, how can you not love a little cute jaguar cub? The jaguars are quite cool. They definitely deserve a lot of love. And it's cool that they're getting a bit of love from Great Cakes, who make some pretty awesome mods. Especially their lions. Like the lions that Great Cakes has made recently are really, really cool. Like even the extinct ones, like, the European one, and also the Cape Lion, and the other subspecies they've made. It's been really, really awesome. But yeah, then we'll move on from that one. There's not too much to say other than it's a jaguar. Next up, we've got by Kanu, one of those really, really cool modders new on the scene. We've got a extinct animal from them. We've got Stenomylus. So let's have a look at this guy. So Stenomylus is a really, really cool animal. It looks like an antelope, but it's actually a type of camel. So it's a miniature camelid native to North America. It is known from the Oligocene to Miocene epochs, or between 23 to 16 million years ago. And its name comes from the Greek word stenos, which means narrow, and mylos, which means molar. So they're extremely distinctive compared to other ancient species and modern species of camel, standing out at only 2 feet tall on average, and they're a slender animal with a long neck and somewhat resemble a modern gazelle. So, very interestingly, we think of camels being African animals, or, Asian animals, or you think of, llamas and alpacas and vicuñas and guanacos all coming from South America. The group of the camels actually originated in America, North America, so they have a deep history there and only went extinct there about 10,000 years ago with the great Quaternary mass extinction. So what's really interesting is that a lot of those species at the time, they took the niches of other species that would have taken other places in the world. So you would have had camels acting like gazelle or like giraffes and things like that. And this is a great example of that. So it looks quite similar to a modern gazelle. So it would have kind of taken that niche in the ecosystem of like a small gazelle. And despite it being a camelid, they actually, as I mentioned, look quite similar to gazelles. The legs were extremely elongated and only had 2 toe bones. And unlike modern camels, they did not have fleshy pads. They had proper hooves, more similar to that of like a deer rather than a modern camel. So that's quite interesting as well. So that probably is an adaptation to deal better with, the solid ground that they'll probably be living on. The neck as well is greatly elongated, making it look similar to a gurnuk. Its head was small, rounded muzzle. The nasal bones were actually set quite far back. That actually suggested the presence of a proboscis or muscular lips. And this characteristic is even more accentuated in the related Rhacomylus, which lived a little bit later than this guy. The dentition is also very specialized, where the anterior teeth were small, and the third incisor as well as the first premolar was similar to the canine. And the upper and second molar are very small, and there's a diastema in the first and second premolars, and both the upper and lower molars were hypsodont in structure, with deep roots even in mature individuals. And also the metacarpals, they had, their leg bones extremely elongated, and only had the 2 toes, as we mentioned, and the metacarpals were diffused as well. So that probably helps, with dealing with, all the stresses of running around and being a gazelle. So in terms of classification, there are 3 different species, but the genus was first described by Peterson in 1907, based on fossils found in the lower Miocene of Nebraska, with the first species being Stenomylus gracilis. Another well-known species, Stenomylus hitchcocki, comes from numerous specimens from Agate Springs in Nebraska. Speaking of Agate Springs, I'm quite excited for the Forgotten Bloodlines Agate. Apparently they had an update just today, I saw on the Kickstarter, saying that they're really working on stuff and trying to get a publisher and all that stuff. So I really hope to see more of that soon. But yeah, that's the species of Stenomylus featured in that show. And Stenomylus itself represents a quite specialized group of camelids, classed in their own separate family called Stenomylidae, that originated during the end of the Oligocene. And the specializations from the lengthening of the legs and the retraction of the nasal bones, as well as the teeth, is situated in later forms of stenomylids, such as Rhacomylus, as we kind of mentioned before. So they're really cool little species. Definitely a big fan. So next up, we've got a couple more Great Cakes mods. I always love to talk about Great Cakes mods. Definitely winners. So let's have a look at this one here. Let's have a look at the male. Let's see if we can spot him. There he is. There, he's got a big guy here. So this is Baratherium. So Baratherium, or Brahman's beast. These guys are an extinct genus of giraffid that range from India to Turkey and Asia. And if you guys know the animal Shivatherium, this is a very similar animal. So its first name is the generic name Brahma, or Sanskrit for masculine, referring to the Hindu god of creation. And Therium refers to Greek beast, so that's where the name comes from. And it lived from the late Miocene into the Pliocene. So yeah, not too similar, as I mentioned, from Shivatherium. So they're built very similar to Shivatherium. It would have resembled a heavily built Okapi in life, and you can see the main thing it sets apart. It's got this really interesting crown of kind of a 4-pronged set of radiating ossicones. So ossicones are different from, horns and antlers. They've got, directly just bits of bone of the skull, and they've also got fur growing over them as well, which is very, very interesting. And fossils and examinations of teeth in particular suggest that this species would have been living in woodland or wetlands habitats, probably feeding on softer plants, making sense being a tall animal like that. But yeah, really, really cool. I do love a nice extinct animal. Speak to camelid, I love, this is not a camel, this is a giraffe. So it's related to the okapi and the modern giraffe. So let's have a look at the female here. So it looks really, really awesome. Definitely a big fan. Another Great Cakes mod winner. So last but definitely not least from Great Cakes mod, we have got the European jaguar, or Panthera gobonensis. I believe you say that. That's not what we wanted to do. Stop that. So here he is. So Panthera gobonensis is often commonly referred to as the European jaguar. These guys are Panthera species that lived in Europe from between 2 million to about 300,000 years ago, and likely other places in Eurasia. Its first fossils were found in 1938 in Kozlebek Cave in Slovenia, and it was proposed by Milos Kresge, who got the name as well. And there had been some subspecies described as well, but they don't really hold up. Some remains once attributed to the species was also found to be of the giant cheetah Aeonyx paravensis as well. And in terms of how it's related, Panthera gobernensis was originally considered to be a direct ancestor to the American jaguar, or Panthera onca, based on similarities of its tooth anatomy, with some studies even suggesting it's just a paleo subspecies or a distinct subspecies of the American jaguar. But a 2022 study that based on a relatively complete skull that was found in Belgium actually suggests it's actually more closely related to the tiger than the jaguar, so that's quite interesting as well. So in terms of its evolution, the ancestors of this European jaguar are thought to have come from Africa, as a related form, which is kind of tentatively assigned to the species, is found in South Africa about 1.9 million years ago. And while a 2011 study considered this record as the origin of the species, some are more cautious and disagree with linking the species to that species, the material to that species. With specimens similar have also been found in other regions in Africa. That means the first definite appearance of them was Europe, was about 1.9 million years ago. P. gobernensis was initially the only European pantherine species in the early Pleistocene. Would have lived alongside Felid's Aeonyx panensis, which is referred to as the giant cheetah. Let's have a look at the female as well. So she's actually got some different patterns to her. So we can see her. Where is she? There she is. So you see she's got like more tiger patterns, which we'll get into why that is probably either is kind of likely or true. But we'll get into it. Also Puma pandonis, and also the Macarodont species Homotherium latidens and Meganteron whitey. So leopards arrive in early Pleistocene as well, or the middle Pleistocene, and also lived with the large lion Panthera fossilaris, which we covered a few episodes ago in the middle Pleistocene. The extinction of the species, the European jaguar, is believed to be about 330 to 300,000 years ago, and it's been suggested to be competitions with lions, but also humans like Neanderthals and Denisovans. That could have been some good competition for them. While the case of the extinction in Sunda was probably due to competition with tigers, so they just kind of got outcompeted. That's kind of considered what happened to them. In terms of its description, the European jaguar is considered larger, or as big as a modern-day jaguar, with later subspecies weighing about 90 to 120 kilograms, with a large specimen being described about 130 kilograms, which puts it on par with a very large modern jaguar as well. So it's possible this species would have brought down larger prey than also living jaguar. It is also thought to be sexually dimorphic, with significantly larger males and females. And while often is asserted that body size increases with time, there's no evidence for a clear pattern as well. The morphology of the lower jaw particularly resembles that of a jaguar, though morphology in the skull has considerable differences as well. They also differ from the living jaguar in some dental characteristics, including having a prominent ventral groove in the upper canines, which is weak or absent in living jaguars, as well as the robustness of the premolar. The postcranial morphology is actually more similar to that to a leopard, so probably a little bit more leaner than you consider, a modern jaguar. Even though they may be about the same weight. We'll have a look at the female again. Oh no, we'll have a look at the baby. We've got to have a look at the baby. Where is she? There he is. Little cutie patootie. So, in terms of records, they are primarily known from Europe, but there are very rarer records of them being found in Georgia, Kazakhstan, Israel, northern Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, northern China, and Java. So quite a wide range for them. And they're thought to have lived foremost in forests, but recent work suggests that these guys wouldn't have been quite as dependent on forests as we assume. But in terms of ecology, they're thought to be a solitary hunter. As 2022 study looking at the skull morphology suggests it was a generalist predator. Isotope analysis as well in the ecosystem of the early Pleistocene suggests that these guys would have been preying on the giant deer Parameganceros ventricornis, and the smaller deer, Metrocerviceros rehenaeus. So types of deer, but also which is prey that's been suggested these guys inhabited forests in this locality, so they would have been eating a lot of those. Other specimens in northern Spain, dating back to the Middle Pleistocene, suggested they would have been an apex predator preying on things like aurochs, bison, red deer, or the giant deer Parameganceros. So they would have been quite a big predator of the time, and preying on some quite big animals. But yeah, I want to have another look. Where is she? There she is. So you can see the difference. I like that they did the kind of two different patterns. I think that looks really, really cool. And fits kind of what we know about these jaguars. Well, this Panthera species. But yeah, really, really cool. So, I think this will be a good time to finish off. So yeah, we're going to make sure to thank everyone. So yeah, thank you Great Cakes Mods for all these wonderful mods. Thank you Kanu. And thank you Monsoon. You've all done a really wonderful job. And yeah, I'm going to sign off. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.